Good afternoon and welcome to the latest podcast in a series of podcasts from Encon. Today I'm actually joined by Niall Rowan from the ASFP. You're the Technical Regulatory and Affairs Officer. That's quite a mouthful now. We're here in the ASFP podcast room, which is very nice, isn't it? It's quite new and modern. And,
it's warm as well, which helps.
And it's very warm, which helps as well. So today's subject, which we're going to talk about, the Building Safety Act, is a subject I think you're well adverse on. You've got a lot of knowledge about, and I'm sure our listeners will be interested to hear your views and your views relating to this particular area. So my first question for you is, it's probably one of the most significant, recognised developments in our industry, especially since we had the disaster in Grenfell. It's very detailed. Yeah, it's a very detailed act, and it continues to evolve. What are the main elements of the act you think we need to be aware of?
Well, as you say, it rightly arises from the Grenfell Tower tragedy, and in particular from Dame Judith Hackett's report on reviewing the building regulatory system, where she said there's a need for systemic change in the industry. And she put forward 53 recommendations. Wow. And the government's response to the 53 recommendations is the Building Safety Act and the Fire Safety Act, of which the largest one is the Building Safety Act. So the main thing about the Building Safety Act, there are a number of things to take in. The first is it's a more stringent regime for what's called HRBs, high-risk buildings, not high-rise buildings, but high-risk buildings.
All right.
Currently, these are 18 metres or 7 stories. Anything more than 18 metres, more than 7 stories, is a high-risk building. The Secretary of State has the ability to change the scope of what is a high-risk building. So he or she could add in, for example, a hospital that's only 3 stories high, but which has progressive horizontal evaluation. And one of the powers of the Building Safety Act is it gives powers to the Secretary of State to make regulation, and on things like construction products, which we'll come on to later. The second thing it has is it has a series of gateway stages: planning permission, permission to build, permission to occupy. And these are hard stop stages, and these were euphemistically known as Hackett gateways during the formation, because again they came from her. It has a concept of registration of high risk building. If you own or operate or planning to build a high risk building, you have to register it. There's other big thing that comes out of it is the golden thread of information. The golden thread of information from design information, approval information, installation information, and maintenance information. A golden thread of information that runs throughout the building's life, so that all the decisions are recorded. Currently, a lot of information gets lost, and that leads to problems later on. There'll be a new national building regulator, which is the HSE, that's the Health and Safety Executive. And the other thing I have to do is people who are preparing for a high-risk building has to introduce a safety case for the HSE. It's modelled on the offshore industry, where they use safety cases and argument put forward to help demonstrate why it's safe.
Is that quite a change from where we are today then?
That is, because at the moment it's either you follow the statutory guidance documents such as Approved Document B in England and Wales, technical standards, etc., and all the other ones in the other devolved nations. Or you do a fire engineering approach, or use a guide such as BS 9999 or BS 9991. All of those approaches are valid. It tends to lead towards the more fire engineered approach. You have to have a safety case that puts it forward. So, and the safety case could be just that I have fire resisting construction throughout this building, and I have sprinklers, or I have whatever fire things are needed.
So from moving on from there then, the future design of our buildings potentially may change because of this.
Yes, the main thing about design is it has to be considered much earlier on than it is at the moment. Whereas at the moment, design, especially in passive fire protection, tends to come later in in the scheme of things,
Okay.
and that gives rise to all sorts of problems, which is why often passive fire protections are kind of reverse engineered or back engineered to suit the situation. A couple of other points I just mentioned is, although the Building Safety Act, and we talk about high risk buildings and we talk about a new regulator, the idea is that the Building Safety Act and the HSE oversees the safety and performance of all buildings, and it promotes the competence of those working on all buildings. So in terms of the regulatory regime, that's for high risk buildings, but it also has an impact on all buildings as well.
What do you think the main three areas are going to be that contractors, and specifically the type of people that NCOM deal with, fire protection contractors, dry lining contractors, sealing contractors, etc. What are the main takeaways they're going to need to think about with this, with the introduction of the Safety Act and the golden thread and the gateways that you've touched on?
For contractors and design, for all the sector groups, so the main thing is early design, because what is happening at the moment is, what happens, we tend to build things, then design them, then get them approved, which is really the wrong way around, when we should be designing them,
Yes.
and then getting them approved and then building them. Under the new Building Safety Act, I keep calling it a new act, it's a year old now, these stages are specific stages and there's no overlap. It's illegal to start building before the design is approved, and it's illegal to occupy the building. Sorry, it's illegal to build other than what was approved. The previous process was faster. The new process will be slower, and it's more reason for getting design right.
So is this in place now then, Niall? The contractors got to be considering this now?
They have got to be considering this now, and they are, in that we are members of a group called the Passive Fire Knowledge Group, which was formed from 8
Yes.
Tier 1 contractors and ourselves and a couple of other trade associations. And they basically were concerned about the level of detail needed for Gateway 2, which is the building permission to build stage.
Yeah.
Because Gateway 2 is full plans. So in other words, it's no good saying, well, we've got this outline design, we're going to give it to our main contractor, and then we'll design some of the fire stopping and the MEP in as we go along. That situation isn't going to be allowed to continue.
So we're actually going to see then some of the installation contractors, whether they be fire or partitions or what happen to be, they're going to be following a specification that's been designed at a very early stage of that building's development, and which they should be then following that specification all the way through.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's the idea. But the other thing is, sometimes those fire specialists, whether they be manufacturers or specialist contractors, have a great deal of knowledge, and they can and should be involved at the design stage. So the message from the Building Safety Act is to main contractors and to architects: bring your fire specialists on early and get the information so that you can actually build something that will work, rather than build something and then realise you haven't got enough space to put in what you want to put in.
Yeah. That may specifically be the case with fire stopping, for example, I'd imagine.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So, Noel, within the Building Safety Act, there are 3 gateways, which you touched on a little bit earlier. What do these represent specifically, and are the gateways relevant to all buildings?
Specifically, they recommend stages. They are hard stops. The idea that one can construct a building and go along and build it first and then go back and get a bit more approval, and go build a bit more and get a bit more approval. And you have a situation where you have requesting local authority building control approval after the building has been occupied. This was identified in Dame Judith Hackett's report as a weakness of the situation. A, it's kind of in the wrong order. It should be a logical sequence. And B, it's too late, because the building's already occupied. Well, tough, yeah. So that's the first thing. They're hard stops. It's applicable to high-risk buildings that are covered by the HSE as the building safety regulator.
Okay.
The Gateway 1 is planning permission. So, in other words, do you have, and that's more an outline of this is what the client wants to build. He wants to build a shopping centre or block of flats or
Yep.
whatever. And the planning permission is concerned with what is the fire strategy of the building, and what access have they got for the fire services, etc. Gateway 2 is permission to build, and Gateway 2 requires full plans. So that is a full plans of all the items they're going to include in the building. Some are more important than others, and some can be phased in a different way, but it's full plans. So the idea that you start building and then design fire stopping around the MEP services later on is going to go. It has to go. We need to move away from build it, then design it, and then get it approved, to design it, get it approved, and then build it. And Gateway 3 is permission to occupy. And on Gateway 3, as a contractor, you have to prove that you built what you said you built, and you have to have records of it. And that all goes into the golden thread.
So the big part for our contractor customers is Gateway 2, when they're actually constructing, and Gateway 3 once it's actually been built, to ensure that they built it to what was specified and how it was laid down by manufacturers.
Now, obviously on site, things change, things happen. Like, I'm going to put this product in this orientation, and I've got all the paperwork, and I've got all the approval. And for some reason, the opening's wrong, or it's a different wall than it was tested in. I mean, that's a good example. And then there is a whole procedure of change control under the Building Safety Act.
Right.
There are major changes and notifiable changes. The major changes, work must stop. So if you change the compartment size...
So we're actually going to see building sites potentially stopping if they're making
Yes.
that for a while.
If you change compartment size, if you change number of stories, work must stop. You've got to go back to the building safety regulator. You're not going to get an answer on your phone in half an hour.
Quickly,
It's
are
going
you?
to be
No.
several weeks. So that's the thing. The other one is a notifiable change. So, for example, changes to the arrangement of fire stopping or something like that. A more minor thing, but could be quite important. Notifiable changes must be notified to the building safety regulator.
Okay. Well, I understand that new legislation is under development for the construction products by the DLUHC. Bit of a mouthful to actually remember that. Following on from the Morale and Day report that was actually produced, what will be in this, and what impact may it have for designers, manufacturers, installers?
Following the Grenfell fire, there's been quite a lot of criticism of some of the manufacturers and of passive fire protection products, and the specification of them was wrong. A lot of it was done on cheapness and the price. We had an architect who'd never worked on a high-rise building. There's a whole load of errors, but one of the things that came out of it is some of the product manufacturers perhaps didn't behave as well as they could have in terms of either the products they were offering or in the testing and certification that they carried out through that. There will be, in September the 4th, the Grenfell Tower Public Inquiry will publish phase 2 of its report, and that will be a very interesting. I mean, it will be very hard hitting. Right. I'm sure of that. So, with that, with our publication of phase 1 a year or so ago report, the government decided to ask Paul Morell and Annalisa Day to provide a report on the construction products industry and how it's supplied and how it's tested and how it's certificated, to take into account the issues that came out of Grenfell and also the issues we were talking about earlier in terms of early design. And they came out with the report, and the report said, the system is too complicated. It relies too much on CE marking, which is a European system for placing products on the market. Yes. And it's more about free trade and less about safety. The system of checking that a product is satisfactory, it's called this wonderful term attestation of and verification of constancy of performance. Just slips off the tongue, as you say. There's several different systems. In other words, it was really quite difficult. It was a bit of a mess, etc. They produced this report, but it didn't have the answer. It didn't have 3 big things that said, well, if you do that, you do that, you do that, and you're done. So the new legislation or secondary legislation under the Building Safety Act, which can be undertaken by the Secretary of State, as I mentioned earlier, they're looking to see what they can do following the Morale report. They still haven't responded to it. And some of the discussions that are going on, I mean, this is partly speculation and partly information we've received. But if you think about the issues of poor design, because they're not involved early enough, poor specification, poor installation, because the installations maybe are not supported by the technical information that the manufacturer gets from a test and certification lab, you start thinking, who knows the product best? And the answer is the manufacturer. The manufacturer knows, it's got all the dirty washing on the he knows how to work better. They know how it should be installed and what was covered under the installation and what is not covered in installation. They know the breadth of products that will be
interfaces, all those type of things as well would be covered in that, would it?
Sorry,
interfaces with other products.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Things?
Yeah, that's exactly. They know. So if you think in that situation that the manufacturer knows best, well, why not the manufacturer control its suitability and performance? Why doesn't the manufacturer have a higher responsibility for the products when they're incorporated into the design? Why doesn't the manufacturer control its installation? Why doesn't the manufacturer install it? Now, there are, it sounds a bit radical, that is. I mean, that's a lot of constructors. But, we do see this to some extent. It happens in the flat roofing industry. It also happens, there's a product, a non-combustible metal face board. I don't think I can mention a trade name in this stage, but there's a non-combustible metal face board with lots of holes in it. You'll see it on the underground. You know what I mean. And the manufacturer is involved in the design and the approval, and it has a list of licensed contractors to install it. And therefore, it doesn't get sold to anybody. You can't buy it on the shelf. It's controlled from cradle to grave.
I think it's an interesting development, and will be interesting to see how manufacturers take that on board and taking on the responsibility of the whole construction.
Well,
I think that's where it needs to go.
You've hit the nail on the head there, because take on the responsibility. If the manufacturer is controlling it all, where does design liability fall? It falls with the manufacturer, which kind of might make them frightened. But at least it would stop this situation where, well, we're only installing what you told us to install. We're not assuming any design liability, but then they have to change a fixing centre or do something. And you have design liability being pushed up and down the chain. And it would certainly finalise that. And I think that would be quite a good thing. Contractors will obviously be thinking, well, the manufacturers are controlling it, so I better get I better get involved with the manufacturers to make sure I'm on their preferred list. That gives the opportunity for manufacturer to control the quality of contractors by third-party certification or whatever.
That is a big shift, isn't it, from where we are today?
And it might not happen, but yeah.
But it would be a positive shift in terms of what needs to happen, and that's perhaps what you and I have both been in this industry for a little while now. Perhaps that's what's needed, because we've seen too many disasters, too many fires in the past where not the actual actions afterwards haven't actually led into any major change in our industry.
There's too much competition. There's a lot of competition. There's the race to the bottom, but also there's so many different parties involved that actually it's quite difficult. I was going to say pin the blame. I'm told not. I'm not allowed to say that. But it's difficult to know where the responsibility is. Whereas if I was a manufacturer, my attitude is, we can do this. I'll be happier with doing this, but I'm going to charge for it. Because they're taking on that liability. They want to do that. But I think for safety critical products, I think this is the direction that's moving. But we're waiting for DLUC they were going to publish a green paper or a consultation, and it's expected any time now. It'll probably be, will be after the election now, I suspect.
No, I think that's a really good place to sort of finish, really. I think the Building Safety Act, your understanding of it has been a good insight for me, and hopefully for some of our viewers who'll be looking out on this as well. We've got another podcast which is going to be coming up in the not too distant future relating to the golden thread and competence, which is a subject you've already touched on during this podcast. So I'd like to thank you for your time, and we look forward to the next one.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoy the facilities of the ASFP, and thank you very much.
Okay.